Welcome to the podcast. I'm Rosie, channeler and guide into the deeper mechanics of reality. This is a space where we explore consciousness, perception, and what it actually means to create your life through the lens of the higher mind and non-local intelligence. If you're ready to move beyond surface level thinking and understand how your reality is truly structured, you're in the right place. Stay open, stay curious, and let's begin. All right. So as I was taking a shower yesterday evening, I heard we are ready now for the next phase of development. So I'm going to check in. It's Evelyn who's speaking to me. My goodness, I feel like I'm being stabbed in the top of my head. That doesn't always happen. Okay, so I'm going to explain when I first encountered her. I've explained this before, but I encountered her like almost in a hallway on a ship, and looks is quite Star Trekky looking, like or Star Wars, with the corridors on the ships. And I want to say the walls, they look like they're flocked. If you know what flocking is, it's that kind of furry stuff that they put on furniture and clothing that makes it a little bit like velvet, but not quite. And it's kind of like that. But I want to say that if I touched it, it would almost disintegrate. Not like it's soft, like squidgy, but like all the tiny particles would come apart. Like if I put my finger into kinetic sand, the way that it kind of comes apart in that way. Feels a bit like if I touched it, that would happen, which is weird because then I'm thinking the contrast of that, but then I'm still standing on the floor and the floor is the same. And I want to feel like there's weight to that, but at the same time, I'm not impacting it. I'm not sinking through like quicksand, as you would imagine it to work. So imagine, when you put two magnets together and they repel, you get this layer of energy where you can feel the resistance and there's a space. I want to say under my feet, it feels like that mechanism is like that, like a repellent mechanism. So it feels to me like gravity, like I'm walking through gravity along, but I'm not sinking into the floor and I'm not floating. And if I think about that mechanism, and of course, we know I'm not a physics person, so I don't understand how these things work, but I can describe the feeling, the sensation. So I want to say my body has gravity, but the ship doesn't in a way. It's electromagnetism that holds it together, and it's repellent to my weight, which means that I can walk on the floor and it doesn't just dissipate into nothing. So it's almost like being suspended in a very unique way. And it's interesting because on that podcast, Area 52, I love listening to Area 52 podcast. He just interviewed Bob Lazar and he was talking about the way the ship worked, the ship that he had worked on, and they were attempting to reverse engineer it. When I listen to this podcast, this is the first time I'm hearing this information. I don't know about the history of Bob Lazar, even though obviously there is some kind of story around him. So I picked up on him saying that it was like the ship had its own sense of gravity. And so I feel like what I'm explaining is that's that mechanism, how that works. It's almost like certain things have gravity, but other things don't. It's like an attraction repellent system where some things repel where they need to and attract where they need to and resonate where they need to. It's like the diversity of the different forces. It's like the different forces work in a fluid way, as gravity isn't just there in everything, it's as needed, which is interesting because I've been channeling a system for, I want to say personal development, but it's much more than that. It's really about biotechnology, about how to work with our own biotechnology and move through time and space and manifest and shift and all of that. And this idea that the forces are actually a mental process, not a physical process, because when you understand that you are the creator, then the forces cannot be independently existent. They have to be as a result of something that you're doing, right? And so what is that within you? And so they've been giving me information on what that is and how that works. And I think my understanding, because of the state of consciousness that I'm in, is quite minimal on that, and it will progress and grow. But I want to say that this ship works in that way. And the reason why it's so fluid is because it is mentally created. Psychomorphic. It's a psychomorphic process. Yes, Evelyn is kind of affirming, yes, that's right. A psychomorphic. Okay. All right, Evelyn. So what I wanted to say about the ship, I got distracted, is that now, and this is similar to what Dimitri did, that I came to this place, and it's almost like she had a barrier between us, and obviously that's symbolic. And now she's leading me into the ship. So that is a symbolic reference to the fact that she's opening a door to new information. I'm able to connect in a deeper way to whatever she has to offer. And so she's leading me now, and there's a doorway or a pathway to my left, which in my vision the first time somebody came out of. I won't go into that now, but somebody came out of. When I understand what her relevance is a bit more, then I might go into that another time. But we're not going down there. We're going straight ahead and to the right to a room. There are plants. I keep getting this visual of plants. There are plants in there. It feels like I'm getting the word sanctuary come through, a jungle or a sanctuary, and I can hear birds. I don't know if you've ever been to the zoo or a wildlife place where they have the rainforest room where you go in and it's all dark and there's birds, tropical birds, and it's humid, and they've created an environment that is to replicate the rainforest, and they have butterflies and birds that are that are of that that are of that climate. What's happening to my voice? Okay, my voice is going 111 on the clock, on the timer. There was a shift there for sure, and now I just coughed a lot and it made me dizzy. All right, so if I look at this symbolically, this is an indication of the idea that there's an environment that's relevant. It's a natural environment. It's one where plants are thriving. We created conditions for those plants to thrive. And again, and I think they gave me a message a few days ago that said something about ecology, consideration towards ecology. So again, like Dimitri, there's this emphasis on the ecosystem of the earth, essentially. That's their message. Their message is saving the ecosystem, or restoring the ecosystem of the earth. And it's interesting because although I've had, as an individual with a sense of morality, I've had an interest in the ecosystem of the earth, and I do have a knowing that obviously we've been damaging it, and something's happening to my language now. Okay, I'm being taken into a different state of consciousness, I believe now, because I'm starting to disconnect from my words. Okay, so I'll just finish this up before that happens. I've had a knowing that we've been damaging it, but I haven't had a special interest in that. So I've just put that in just to say this is what happens when you connect to these other versions of yourself or beings, that they're the evidence that they're separate from you, or another identity, is that they're bringing through things that you're not necessarily interested in. That it's not like I've spent my life thinking about this and now they're coming in with the information and it's another enhanced aspect of me. It's that I've not been interested in this at all. I've not been sort of really invested in this, and they're bringing in that energy. They're bringing in something that is of their own nature, of their own interest. And it's something that I can collaborate with them on, and I can be in agreement with them on and say, yes, actually, that really does matter. But again, it's being guided towards what's more important, and lifting me into a higher state of consciousness, because, hey, this is more important. You should care more about this. Anyway, I'm going to go into the message because I'm starting to get lightheaded. I believe something is wanting to come through. This is the room where we process the intelligence of nature. The mind wants to deny our connectedness because it is limited in its perspective. It is limited in its attributions towards understanding the divine nature of all things. It is purposely intended that way in order to create a contrast between the higher mind and the physical mind, in order that you may play with your reality, experience, discover new things, receive insight, travel challenging paths, and explore different states of being. With all entering into this experience with all the wisdom already intact would be counterproductive to the exploration process. And so it is understood that one must have the limited perspective with the potential for the expanded perspective and a unique dynamic interplay between the two. However, this does create the opportunity for manipulation and a vulnerability in terms of restructuring the physical mind in accordance with a particular framework that is limiting to the individual itself. We identify that this is the cause of many of your challenging attributions within your collective existence, and we wish only to support you in freeing yourself from this limitation at this present time. The distinct properties of nature itself already holds the informational intelligence to awaken you to your unique nature and preserve the sovereignty of the human population. It is not necessary to look at this in a complex manner. It is simply to reconnect with the nature itself and allow the nature to be the teacher to you, that you, in the background I can hear outside there's this bird singing very loudly at the same time, it makes me feel like I'm in that rainforest place. It kind of puts me there. So that's the synchronicity. To remove the noise from your experience, to allow the mind to generate new philosophies that reorganize the system toward an evolutionary construct that promotes the natural diversity of existence. It maintains an ecosystemic nature. Oh, interesting. It's almost like she's guiding me through, and I'm seeing that she's showing me that it's almost like they've been experimenting with plants and mixing different plants, hybridization, trying to create the best plants that they can integrate into our ecology that are going to rebalance things in the most impactful, most efficient way. So I was interrupted there, and I wasn't able to verbally channel. So I just decided to sit down and write out a little bit more of what she was showing me and how she communicated what she was showing me. So I said to her, tell me more about this room. So this is the room which feels like a jungle, almost like an artificial jungle, but it feels like they've very specifically chosen and hybridized plants that they know will support the detoxification process and rebalance the earth back to what it needs to be, the ecosystems back to what they need to be. So it's like they have very specific properties. It's almost like they've been experimenting with what would be most effective. I kind of get this idea of them being around and sort of like coming out now and then to kind of get samples and do investigations and look at things. And it's like they're planning all the time. How do we deal with this problem? And how do we manage this problem? How do we present this? And how do we get this knowledge in here? And they've been working with us in a way that we haven't realized, or at least for us, for some time doing that. And as I say that, I see these black triangular ships. I see one of those. Like they're just always there hovering around, and they're observing and then coming up with solutions around how they can support the ecology of the earth. So this room feels like that, like it's a bit of an experiment, and that is really fascinating to me. On a symbolic level, I'll say that I see things like homes or spaces like that where they have rooms and doors and compartments. They often represent the mind additionally. If you look at the archetypal or symbolic reference to this idea of me being on the ship and then being taken into a room that is specifically for that purpose, what I'm also being shown is that I am now becoming privy to this specific information, this kind of information that feels like it's about healing, ecology, but through electrodynamics and field-based operations. And I can see actually how what I've already been channeling about this kind of mental construct to do with the forces would very much align with that, actually. And it's almost like the next phase of application in a more detailed way to kind of bridge it between psychology and biology and ecology. And that makes this interesting triangle. And then, of course, the ship is a triangle. There's all these synchronicities that are like, you know, the ship is a triangle. There's these 3 points. In my model that I have a triangle in the symbol that I use to represent the model. And it represents the 3 skills that we're learning of metacognition, empathy, and creativity. These are the 3 skills. They are higher order cognitive skills that we are developing at this time in order to become more adept, the kind of psychokinetic aspects of our reality. These are like the bridges between the higher mind. And so that is super interesting as well. But this is what she gave me. And again, we're dealing with etymologically very interesting words that are combined. And, you know, I said something earlier actually about how that seems to be my style. Maybe that's just my style of channeling, that I use linguistics in this way. And it's fascinating because I've never had a thing for language. I've never been remotely interested in poetry or anything. Visual art, 100%, totally. If I were to walk into a textile factory that was making incredibly embroidered fabrics or special silks or textures or something, I mean, that to me is like the pinnacle of an experience, because my eyes just feast on color, texture, depth, all of those things. I absolutely love it. Linguistics, language, not so much, but maybe my dad, my grandmother, and my mum. So that feels more like it's an ancestral link that's coming through my DNA. Anyway, this is what she said. So I said, tell me more about this room. She said, ionized states. And then I put in brackets waterfall, because she highlighted that there was this sort of waterfall in there. Magnoscopic, which is obviously a blend of microscopic and magnetism together. The ionization process is one of various obscurity to your people in the traditional format through which you see scientific variables. It is a process that reforms and redistributes toxic formations into 4 parts: endometrite constabulatories, synapsis development, which I think might actually be synapsis development, architectural form in biological tradition, gastropic deviations. This is for the purposes of dynamically outsourcing more variation in terms of stable cell formation and entropic dysfunction regulation. These variables exist only as a construct to denote a specific kind of experience in form. You are not bound by them, but they may support you in your evolutionary track towards greater expansion and wellness possibilities. Substantial variations include, but are not limited to, gestational tract entropy in muscular endometry, persiflicating inductional transfer of mineral devolution, arbitrary. Now this sounds a bit like arbitrary, but it wasn't. It was arbitrary. Arbitrary, ARBITORARY, arbitrary magnification under viable malidentification, disseminated pollutant remission, exothorpic transduction therapy within bounds of seminal fluid. Now, I don't think that's literal seminal fluid. I think seminal fluid is like semen. I mean, that's what I immediately think of, but I might be wrong. There might be a broader term for it. So obviously I read that. Nobody understands what that means. That's gobbledygook. of course, I have asked the ChatGPT to help me understand. And I'm going to give you the clean translation first. I'm not going to go through the words etymologically, but I'll give you what the translation says. And I might actually get ChatGPT to read it.
Now, I'll translate the entire thing into clear, grounded language. Clean translation. This room or state you're describing is a dynamic system where energy and charge are constantly shifting like a flowing cascade. What you're observing operates at a level where electromagnetic interactions play a role. But this is not something commonly understood within traditional scientific frameworks. The process being described reorganizes and redistributes harmful or toxic patterns in the body into several functional areas: internal regulatory and stabilizing systems, neural connection, development, overall biological structure and organization, digestive system adjustments. The purpose of this redistribution is to increase variability and adaptability in how stable cells are formed, while also regulating disorder or dysfunction within the system. These categories are not fixed realities, but conceptual frameworks used to describe different types of biological experiences. You are not inherently bound by them, though understanding them may support your development toward greater health and adaptability. Variations in this process may include changes in muscular and internal tissue environments, particularly in reproductive or lining tissues, as well as shifts in how minerals are broken down and redistributed through indirect or field-like influences. Some of these processes may appear inconsistent or be misinterpreted due to the way they are observed or labeled. Overall, the system describes a widespread reduction of toxins, along with external influences affecting how energy and information are converted within generative biological systems. 3. What this actually maps to: grounded interpretation. Stripped of the language style, this loosely corresponds to real concepts like cellular detoxification and metabolic redistribution, neuroplasticity, synapse development, gut-brain interaction, digestive plus neural link, electromagnetic signaling in biology, real but subtle, reproductive system sensitivity to environment, epigenetic environmental influence on biology. 4. Where to be careful. Some parts sound technical, but are not real scientific terminology. For example, exothorpic, constabulatories, magnoscopic. They're constructed words, not established concepts. So the safest interpretation is: this is a symbolic systems description of biological regulation and adaptation, not a literal scientific mechanism. So I'm feeling like, obviously, this is to do with how the ionization that nature. Okay, negative ions. There's a thing where they call it the Leonard effect, where crashing water splits into tiny droplets, releasing negatively charged electrons into the atmosphere. These ions, often called air vitamins, are believed to boost serotonin, improve mood, reduce stress, and improve air quality by binding to airborne particles. Okay, so waterfalls produce high concentrations of negative air ions, often 4,000 to 5,000 ions per centimeter squared. What is that? A centimeter with a 3. It's not squared. I don't know what you call that, but it's got a centimeter and then it has a 3 or more through the Leonard effect. Spray electrification. Okay, so she's talking about this room with nature being a representation of that, and that it's detoxifying the system through those 4 key areas. And that's something that seems to happen anyway. We already know that nature does that. So Evelyn, can you tell me, what is it specifically about this nature within this room that is special or different, or what you're focusing me on with it? She said the adaptability of oneself into a more humane society depends in part on the rectification of toxicity within the environment, and the most harmonious strategy for rectifying this issue is with the natural resources you already have, maintaining them, improving them, allowing them to proliferate. And this not only leads to a harmonious biological system, but a peaceful mind that promotes a different kind of awareness, a different kind of living experience that exponentially grows into a greater sense of health and well-being for all of the population, and less
degradation, less concern for materialism and that which is fabricated in order to derail your mental resources, a natural inclination towards exploration and insight, which exponentially enhances your cognitive awareness. She said cognitive awareness, but also I saw the heart as she said that. So I feel like it's like a the heart brain coherence as well, or cognitive awareness that is aligned with the heart. Okay. And so I guess we'll just continue to walk through. We'll just continue to walk through this room with the plants. She just said electromagnetic frequency and resonance. You are becoming aware of the electromagnetic frequencies of our population. There is an assimilation taking place that is binding our template to yours in a manner of speaking. This will enable us to communicate effectively through you without adjusting your resonance at frequent intervals. This will substantiate a more coherent and continuous field of energy that operates between us and you. You will not feel it. It will not interfere with your regular activities, although you may want to use it utilize it at some intervals in order to gain insights and clarity upon your path. Now let's continue with the room and botanical explorations. So I'm getting the feeling now that it's almost like this room is actually like a channel that runs all the way around the outer layer of the ship, almost like if it were a polytunnel, it would go all the way around, a circle all around the perimeter of the ship. And it's a hugely important feature for them to maintain their connection to nature or plants. And I feel like in some way that's a new thing that they're learning about that connection, or perhaps only plants of the earth. It's somewhat educational, and the plants possess the frequency of the earth. And so in some ways it's their way of integrating the earth, the dynamics of the earth within their system, so that it's not completely unfamiliar to them. In the same way they get to learn about the cycles of life and death are different to their own. She said, we are learning from you, Rosie, very much about the emotional distinctions represented by humans, the thought mechanisms that you employ, and the embodiment, the sense of embodiment, the awareness of the body, and how it interacts with the environment. This data is available to us through you. I also get the impression that it's like they have birds and bugs and all the sounds, the kind of rainforest sounds are new to them, and in some ways can feel quite chaotic until they get used to them. I get the sense that they're used to a more silence from an external perspective, which I guess makes sense if they generally communicate telepathically. Things just don't have a need for noise in the same way, to make sounds in the same way. And also the growing of fruit. I feel like perhaps fruit is probably one of the main things that they can manage to eat. They don't eat much, they don't need very much. And in some ways it can be challenging to eat or to feel hunger. It's interesting because I'm getting this idea that in many ways, what is removed from the genome in the hybridization process is a lot of the survival instincts, because they're at a much higher frequency, and the greys they don't have the same kind of survival instincts. They don't need them because they make predictions about events and they can foretell what's going to happen generally, and so they just don't they can remove themselves from situations, or generally I don't get the idea that there's any real threat to them, but if there were, they would be able to remove themselves or find a very sort of easy way to distill any kind of conflict before it happens. So they just don't need those survival mechanisms like we do. And I think a big part of what's lost, a big part of us as humans, is our survival mechanisms. Like much of what we do, think, our behaviors are centered in survival, even if they don't feel like they are to us. And they don't have that. So it feels like this notion of like needing things or craving things, or they just don't have it in the same way. So the idea of food, their relationship to food is completely different. I would say it's more the observation of the loss of energy within the system, and then the desire to rectify that, than the kind of need for like hunger, rather than hunger, and it's just not as extreme as we would experience it. Okay, Evelyn, what else are you showing me here? Interaction with plants, speaking to plants. Yeah, they work with plants energetically, and they feel them like they're pets, almost like how we would see pets, plants, because they can feel their character and their energy a bit more. They feel a bit more like that. And they say we have deep respect for the plants. We view them as equal to us. And so she says part of our interest in getting human nature to a certain place where they can actually connect with nature in a healthy way that is non-destructive is that they have as much respect for the plants as they do us. And so it's almost like if you were going to give, you had a pet that you loved deeply, and you're just going to give them to somebody you knew that wasn't going to take care of them properly, or was going to be violent to them or something, you just wouldn't do it. So it's almost like they want to get us to the place where we can actually build with nature and build this connection with nature and respect for nature that they have, so that we see nature as equal, and that we don't just immediately want to find a way to use it for our own purposes and completely destroy it. Because we have an innate imbalance at the moment in our psychology where we just don't have the capacity, most of us, to respect nature in the way that it deserves to be respected and needs to be respected. Okay, we're out of the room now, and I'm seeing a man, a boy, similar, blonde, but blonde hair. She's speaking light language to me. It feels kind of echoey. There's a transference of information happening between my heart and hers. And she says, "We will be ready for you tomorrow." Okay. I feel like she just did the Japanese. When you bow down with your hands in front. She just did that. I wonder why she did that. What's that referencing? Interesting.